Unbound Gravel is the Super Bowl of gravel racing and off-road racing in general here in the United States and possibly the world. And it's this week. We caught up with Keegan, Swenson, and Sofía Villafañe, two of arguably the best off-road racers in their final week of preparation leading into this. This is an audio-only podcast, so you'll see just images that will run as a slideshow as you hear our discussion with the two of them. We only had a short bit of time as they were very busy leading into this, so we hope you enjoy it. Sofía, it's been, I think, over 2 years now since you've been on the podcast.
Time flies, huh?
Yeah, I know, right? Sofía Villafañe from Specialized Off-Road is with us here. How far out are we from Unbound?
Oh gosh, today is Tuesday of the week before, so less than 12 days to go, I think.
Getting close.
Yeah.
Today, I was out there while you were training. You had spicy workout in the heat. All the hard things, you were on a climb too amidst all that, so it wasn't like you were getting a whole lot of cooling. With 2 weeks out, are you focused on turning down volume? Are you still holding on and ramping things up going into such a big race like Unbound?
You know, I feel like every year it's changed just because my schedule leading into Unbound has changed. Like in 2022 when I won Unbound 2 weeks before, we were racing Rule of 3 in Arkansas, and I was recovering from that crazy race and then trying to get some fitness or some speed back in the legs for Unbound. In the past 2 years, I've had May as like a chill, no racing, just focus on training. And then this year, my March and April were super stacked, busy racing, basically raced all my fitness. And then May was kind of, okay, let's make sure we're recovered and then just get a nice 2 week block. So right now I'm on the first day of a 3-day block, and then I'll go to a 2-day block, and then race week, that's when I start to really taper things down.
So this is interesting because I think a lot of average athletes are like, I need X amount of days as a taper. And ideally leading into every event, I always have the same final 4 weeks or something. But it seems like you take a more dynamic approach with it that's really based on how everything leading up to that.
By I'll mean my coach. I rely on her for everything.
Carmen Small, by the way.
Yes, she's the best. Yeah, it's things are different. You also have to see how your body is responding, kind of how you're doing with whatever's going on. Are you racing? Are you not? And for me, because I finished this block in April feeling pretty fresh, I didn't feel the fittest, but I didn't feel oh my God, I need 3-4 days off. So I kind of took just 3 days easy and then got back into the training routine and did last 2 weekends ago, I did the shootout, and things weren't great. I got my butt kicked. I got dropped on helmet because we had a nice tailwind, and Matthew Riccatello and was it Sean Christian or somebody else? They just went super hard up the climb, and then they got the KOM, and I was way off the back. And last week, or this past Saturday, I showed up and I kind of hit in a bit more and had one of my best 1 minute powers on Sprint Hill. So
wow.
Yeah.
Matthew Riccatello, by the way, for those that don't know, rides for Israel Premier Tech, I believe is the team's name this year. I might have said it wrong.
I think so.
World Tour rider. Has had some very impressive results this year already. I believe on the Green Mountain climb or something, I believe in Tour of Oman. I may be remembering that incorrectly, but very impressive athlete. That's what you get every Saturday here in Tucson.
Oh, exactly.
Just a super hard group ride that's like a race.
Yeah, and then even the local kids from here, from El Grupo, when they're going, I know I showed up at the beginning of the year in Tucson in December, and I was getting dropped by the children. And I was like, oh my God, I have some work to do. And a month in after training, I'm like, yeah, I got them now. I can drop them, or they're breathing really hard. But the field of talent in Tucson, from the roadies to the gravel people, to sometimes we have mountain bikers that come in. We've had some of the best enduro racers from Canada that come out and throw down at the shootout. Triathletes as well, with Ben Hoffman, Sam Long, and Paula. She rides for Specialized. Finley, yeah. I got to meet her at shootout. So the depth in Tucson is unreal. And yeah, on Saturdays, a day where you wake up really early to ride your bike with a bunch of people, and you go really hard, and it's kind of this test race where you can see how your legs are feeling, really see the work that you're putting each week start to pay off. And also to me, it builds my confidence, but it's also the most humbling ride I'll do all the time. So it's, like for me, it's both. It's good and bad.
Can we talk about motivation a bit? You've been, throughout the course of actually this podcast, it's probably like kind of like if we could check in and play all the podcasts that you've been on, it'd be so interesting to see how you've evolved as an athlete, your career, your motivations and everything, and where you've been racing. How do you stay motivated? We get this question from a lot of athletes, where they say that they're prepping for the same races. They're wondering how they have that fire and stoke that fire. You've been racing the Lifetime Grand Prix and similar events for the last 4 years now. 5, is it?
Well, 22 started full gravel, so 22, 23, 24, and this is my 4th year.
How do you keep it fresh?
That's a great question. I think as an athlete, I know I'm always looking to improve and get better. Regardless of what, like even before the season ends, no matter how good or bad the season was, lately it's been really good years that I've had. It's always with my coach, all right, what's next? What can we do? What new stimulus can we introduce? And how can you be a better athlete? And how can you perform better? Also, when it comes to specific events, especially in the women's field, the dynamic of the race that we have has really changed. You know, the first year we did Unbound, 2022 as part of the Grand Prix. It was mass start, everybody together. It was the scariest first 90 minutes of my life. Then we show up the next year and they're like, all right, you guys have separate starts. You're 5 minutes behind the men. And next thing, 90 minutes in, we hit the famous mud section, and then we already caught the back of the men's field because we were going faster than them, and then we're back to where it was last year. And then the year prior, and then last year, they were like, okay, separate starts. We'll give big buffers between the elite men, the pro women, and the amateur men. So things kind of changed a bit there, and I still got caught by the front of the 200 amateur men, and I know some of the other women did as well, but the front of the race was for the most part protected. And then now this year we're showing up and it's 200 miles, women separate start, no drafting rules, and that is a completely different environment. And I think that has happened a lot in the women's races that I've experienced. Is every year I might be showing up to the same event, but the way that the race is laid out leads to really unpredictable racing, just because the dynamics are completely different when you're starting with men or starting without. That being said, other races that I show up to, trying to think, I feel like most races they're changing some part of the course or they're doing something, and I don't know, I guess for me it's just okay, that's a race I got to do and it's on the calendar, and normally I try to introduce 1 or 2 new or different events within each season just to keep me really motivated.
This year was Chaka. You won that. Fantastic job.
Yes, thank you.
I guess going into that, how is racing going to change for the women's field at a race like Unbound now that you can't draft? How do you think? We don't know, of course.
We don't know. I mean, we saw it at Chaka in the 360. It's women weren't obeying the rules, and they got rid of a lot of women, and then a lot of those women got ridden back by men. So obviously with the big time gaps at Unbound, I don't think that's really going to be an issue for the women, barring any crazy weather where there's, some big mud section where something slows down a lot of people, but I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think the front of the race is going to kind of stay the same as it was to last year. I think that front group is just going to get whittled down as people puncture and whatnot, but it's what happens behind. Like when I punctured last year, my first time I was able to plug it, get back on. It was pretty early on. But then my second puncture, I was alone, and then I caught a few of the other girls that had gotten dropped, but I was going so much quicker that I got rid of them. And then next thing I know, they're all latched onto the front of the amateur men.
And so they could get towed right back up.
And they got towed back up, and then I jumped on that, and then I had a different mechanical that took me out of being with them. And I was like, oh my God, what if I catch the front of the women's race with these dudes? And I get to be like, Lifetime, I told you not to let me do this. I remember seeing Michelle Duffy on a corner of the course when I was behind these men, and she just had this ghost look of And I looked at her and I was like, I asked you not to let me do this. And then, you know, gravel gods gave me another mechanical, and that was that. But I think we're going to see a lot more cluster of women behind that kind of get together and ride together. And even if you have somebody that's super strong, I don't think they're going to try to go ride 120 miles by themselves if they got dropped super early.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, you know, if you're going to try to just go solo and just push through all that, it's just going to be so tough. It's interesting because I feel like there's probably a certain level of dependency that's subconscious that's built up in the women's field of, at an event like that, of understanding the fact that, like, well, if I do get dropped here, I'm probably going to have riders moving up, like, you know, because it's been so mixed that I can probably latch on with somebody and maybe they can tow me up. Whereas
For sure.
now, like, you can't miss the splits.
Yeah.
Because so it suddenly like changes the racing is much more decisive.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the DNF rate of the women's, actually, to see if that changes at all. Because, I mean, 200 miles, if you got to do, even if you have to do half of that by yourself, that's going to be slow. Especially, I think we're going to have a headwind coming into town this year. I mean, last year the conditions were perfect. There was so much moisture that had happened before that the course was running super fast. There was no wind. Temperatures were really good. Like, yeah, this year, I don't think we'll have a 10.5. I'd be sick if we have a 10.5-hour race day. But
shorter.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. But I don't think that a 12-hour a day is out of the question. And I think we got to see that in the 360 for Traca, where the women's winning time the year prior was 12-something, and then they were just under 14 this year.
Changes.
A lot, yes.
Yeah. Another, changing gears over to equipment, your setups have changed. I feel like your bike setups have changed. You seem to be running a bike that has like a lower front end now and changing that up. What have you learned that really helps with a gravel setup in terms of equipment?
Yeah, I think, have I lowered, like, obviously dating Keegan, he has always put me on a pretty aggressive setup on the drop bar.
Somewhat of a bike fitter.
Yeah, somewhat. He did, you know, that was one of his first jobs. He was working at an ice cream shop, and then he quit that to go work under his buddy that had a bike fitting job, bike fitting studio. So he's actually really good at, like, seeing somebody and kind of identifying a few things.
Yeah.
But I'm also really flexible, and recently I discovered I have a pretty large leg discrepancy difference between my left leg and my right leg, and it can be up to like 12 millimeters, which is
Whoa.
a lot. Yes.
Do you run a shim under the cleat or in the shoe for that?
So I just started, and we found this out with Retool 2 years ago, where, you know, they put you on the table and they assess, and they're like, like one of your legs doesn't reach as far down, and we see that. And then the way that they assess you, they're like, we think it's not just a leg discrepancy on the femur or just on the tibia. Like, it seems to be like proportionally on both. So they moved me to the Power, the 3D printed, the Mimic saddle.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, when you're on that one, your hips tend to be more even, and just for fun, we're gonna put a 3 mil space or shim on your left foot to like bring that lower leg up and see what happens. And the moment they did that, the way that I pedaled and I was sitting on the saddle was just so much more steady. And the cool thing, I mean, with road shoes, it's easy because you just add a shim and you're done. But on the mountain bike, you have what they call the pontoons, which is the side that kind of has the contact with...
Like the tread that comes off the shoes?
Yes.
That's adjacent to the cleats?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is what puts, I think that's what does the contact with...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and if you
contacts the pedal body itself.
Yeah, so if you put a shim under your cleat, you don't get that contact point. But with the S-Works Recon shoes, the pontoons are interchangeable, and they come in like 3, 6, and 9 millimeter sizes, actually. So if you need to run a shim, you switch those pontoons out and your contact remains the same, which is, to me, has been really game changer to be able to run a shim on my left foot and not have any contact or like weirdness on how my cleat and pedal.
I never knew those pontoons were interchangeable. That's huge.
Yes.
Because that's like when your shoes wear out and your foot you start to feel like you're pedaling on top of like a ballpoint pen. Like your foot can kind of rotate around, and that's usually because those tread blocks or those pontoons are worn down.
Yeah, so
you can swap them out.
Yes, I will say it's a bit tedious. Like, I have a few pair of custom shoes that they've given me from the factory that, like, I just asked for my left shoe to have the 3 mil already put in.
Yeah.
And like the way that those shoes come, the holes to access the screws are perfect. I haven't looked at a recent pair of like inline shoes to see how that looks like, but I do know it is a bit of a process of like finding the tiny little screw that you have to like hit to like unthread it. So it is a bit of a process. I'm just thankful now that they take care of that at the factory for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Specialized, because I used to just send my shoes to Ashley in Boulder, and she would just put the spacers in for me because she's done it so many times. But yeah, that's something I found out through the Retool Bike Fit. Okay, I have this leg discrepancy thing, and that made me pedal better. They also, moved me to the 3D printed saddle, which has been really nice for these long events, just because I think it just a way comfortable saddle. And then, Keegan has had me on 165 cranks for, I don't know, when I used to race for like the Stan's Pivot team. So, like,
you were the OG short crank person.
yes, I think, Chloe was, but she's also a lot shorter than I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been on 165 cranks for a really, really long time. So that for me hasn't changed.
Stand back, Tade. It was Chloe Woodruff.
Yeah, exactly. The tiny people in the cycling industry. But yeah, I mean, things that have changed, I've gone to narrower handlebars just because I've learned.
How wide are yours now? Do you know? Are you
38s.
38s?
Yeah, and then I run my hoods tilted, and at the hoods I'm at 26.
Okay.
And I run the Rapide for aeroness.
That's the one-piece bar stem?
It's not the one piece, it's just the aero. I think it's Alpinist, the one that's one piece.
Yep.
Well, there's an Alpinist, I think. I should be careful on what I say. There is an integrated one that I have on my tarmac, but on my gravel bikes, because I need to get that front end low enough, they don't make it in -17.
Yeah.
So I have to run a 2-piece system, and I could always go for the Terra handlebar, which I used to have on my STR, because I just figured if I'm running the STR, the Terra is nice because they have a wider drop. So then I'm like, well, if I'm riding the STR, I probably will want a wider drop.
That's the hybridish full suspension gravel bike, the STR.
I mean, it's not suspension because
Yeah,
it's suspend the rider.
Thank you. Nailing the PR checklist. Good job,
Yes.
Sofía.
Hopefully Ben is listening. But yeah, and then gearing, I mean, when we first started gravel racing, we were on Shimano, and then we switched to SRAM after our first year, and they've come out with, a lot of cool stuff with the transmission and then the new SRAM Explorer group set. I will say I do tend to just stay on the transmission, and it's probably what I will still run at Unbound with a 46 tooth up front and a 1052 in the back.
Lets you use all that range if you need to.
Yeah, and then with my hammerhead, I pair your shifting gets automatically paired. But then also with your power meter and everything, then I go into my Axis app after, and I can get data of how much time I spent in each gear and all of that stuff. So it gives me a way to every time I've analyzed it, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I spent, 15 minutes in my smallest gear, but my average watts were 100. So I'm like, it doesn't matter.
It's not a critical time.
Exactly.
Or intensity.
If I'm losing a couple, if it's costing me 5 extra watts, 105, that's not much. But if it's 290 versus 300 watts, then yeah, that's a big difference. So it's been a cool thing to kind of, at least for me, understand is that I don't do big power in that super heavy gear. It's very rare that I am spinning that gear out.
So you want to optimize. So you use that to find your chain, not just the chain length, but the time spent at critical intensities, and then you prioritize that.
Yes, and then also, okay, how much time am I spending on the 52? Could I have gone with the Explorer group set and just have a 46? And I just like to spin. I'm a spin to win kind of girl. I've been working really hard on my cadence, and my legs feel fresher the higher that is. But yeah, and then of course tires. I feel like, we started always trying to run the narrowest tire, and now we're, thinking mountain bike tires for Unbound, although right now I'm leaning towards the 50 Tracers just because they're such a great tire and I love them, and I don't know if I need a mountain bike tire, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to see what all the other girls say.
Yeah,
do.
that'll be interesting to see. I do want to ask you about one more trend before we end this one. Heat training. We're in Tucson. You heat train by necessity. It just is what it is. But do you actually follow heat training protocols?
I did for the very first time this winter, actually, to get ready for the Cape Epic, just because Matt warned me that we were going to Parle, which I had raced an XCO there the year that I raced it with Haley, and I detonated in the heat, and also there were so many girls on the side of the 90-minute XC, like with heat exhaustion, because it was so hot.
Oh, jeez.
And this year in Parle, it was very, very hot. So I did some heat training leading into that. And then ever since, I haven't. Like, maybe with my coach, we talked about, should we add some passive heat training, like spending time in a really hot tub or anything like that. But we decided against it. I mean, Tucson, we do get heat. It is dry heat, so it's a little bit different than the humid, the humid heat that we might experience in Kansas. But like here it drops below 75 and I'm like, ooh, it's cold. Like we keep the house at 75 right now and I'm normally with a sweater and like a little blanket because once the AC is blowing, to me it's really cold.
Yeah. We're outside now. You're used to being in warmer conditions.
Yes. So, but that's also like, how do people react, you know? Like also if you're doing altitude training helps you with the heat. If you're doing heat training, that also helps you with altitude adaptation. So yeah, it's funny how everybody's posting photos of them on the trainer sweating, you know, but you also have to be really careful. Like when I was doing it, I would finish a ride, get undressed, weigh myself, hop on, and I was allowed to drink because I was doing up to like an hour and I was checking my ear temperature. I had like a little laser thermometer I would stick into my ear and I would get to a certain core temperature and then I would hold it there. Where what Keegan was doing was very different than what I was doing. And then once that was done, and I was allowed to drink liquids, but they had to be room temperature liquids.
To not offset that, to not drop your core temp.
Exactly, yeah. And then I would, finish that, get undressed, get back on the scale, and figure out what that difference was and make sure that I was getting that type of fluid in. So
Got it.
Nothing too crazy. I do think you can overdo it with heat.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not careful with your rehydration strategy. And it is a stressor. I think sometimes people forget that. Like, you're already stressing your body so much on the bike and in the gym that, like, the heat, it's a lot of TSS. Like, that hour, I don't know, 50 TSS, well, 50 seems a bit high, but like 35 to 40 TSS that you might get in that hour is a very different than a 40 TSS
on the bike,
ride, on the
just
bike, spinning or whatever. Like it's much more intensive and it's a hard thing to adjust and like think about because not all TSS is created equal. So with my coach, we just always go towards better safe than sorry.
Yeah, smart.
You know? But yeah, that approach works for us.
Yeah. Well, Sofía, Unbound's the next race for you. You'll be at a bunch of other races. People can find Sofía on Sophie the Villa. We'll put that on the description here so you can see that. Thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Yeah,
it's been a long
thanks for
time.
having me.
You can follow Sofía's team too, Specialized Off-Road Racing. When you support the sponsors and supporters of these athletes, then it all starts to make sense for the brands supporting them, makes the world go round, gets more athletes supporting this and more brands supporting athletes.
Give my 80-kilo climber teammate, Matt Beers, a follow. He needs all the American fans we can get. He's got the best sense of humor and he's such a great teammate. I'm so happy that he's part of my little bubble. But yeah, make sure to follow him too.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Sofía. Keegan Swenson, it's been over a year since you've been on the podcast.
It's been a minute.
Which is kind of crazy because a lot of people say that all we do is talk about Keegan. You haven't been on the podcast. I could probably search all the metadata. We probably haven't mentioned your name a whole lot either. So it's good to have you back on.
Good to be back.
We just spoke about this with Sofía, but we're within 2 weeks to Unbound. You shared on Instagram that the season's been a roller coaster so far for you. You had Epic that didn't go as intended and planned, and then you had that win at Sea Otter where you puked across the finish line. Epic finish. I don't think that was planned, by the way.
No, it wasn't intentional.
when after that, next week, Levi's Grand Fondo. Then under the weather coming into Whiskey Off-Road, and then you go and do a big elevation block. Are you ready for Unbound? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, I think we are now.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's been kind of up and down, but nice. Got a little hard reset here in Tucson. A little bit of rest, and then we went up and just knocked out a good few weeks up in Silver City at altitude, and kind of got the body feeling good again and feeling like myself. So.
What are you doing when you're at altitude? Like, you've mentioned before on the podcast that altitude isn't real. That's like how you feel. So most people when they go to altitude, they're putting down like easier work. Is that what you do when you're at altitude, or do you do hard stuff?
We did a few days easy early, just like some kind of normal, kind of basic endurance rides we call them, just to kind of give myself, like 3 or 4 days of easy rides, and then got into a bit more intensity, hard endurance, threshold. That was kind of what we did the first week, and then a little bit of VO2 the next week.
And this is up at how high, roughly?
Town is at about 6,000 feet in Silver City, and then most of the riding, like most of the training, was up closer to 7.
So you're somewhere around like 2,300 meters for the high point, 1,800 meters for the low point.
Yeah.
So that's fairly high for for Euros. That would be like very high. Those from Europe listening to this, and a lot of the time the narrative is like don't do anything hard up at altitude, but it's not like you're going hard every day, but you're not afraid to do the hard stuff up there?
Yeah, I mean, I know I adapt quite quickly to altitude. So, like 3 or 4 days, and I feel like I'm kind of good to start jamming. Obviously, like, you are limited. Like, your threshold changes a little bit. I think, mine doesn't change.
Or a lot, depending if you're an average person.
Like, mine only changes a little bit. We actually didn't change it when I went up there. We just kept it the same and kept training at the same power. And I think normally I do my Unbound block down here in Tucson, but, with the heat, it's like you also can't train as hard in the heat. You kind of have to, like, be a little bit gentler in the throttle that way. So I think I can actually train harder up at altitude, even though it's higher. The weather's cooler, and also it's just nice to have a change of scenery for me. I spend so much time here in Tucson. It's nice to kind of change it up and ride some new roads, just kind of do something different. And a big thing is also just a training camp. It's like, in a way, like my life is kind of a training camp. It's like Sofía and I, that's what we do, right? Yeah. Professional, so like you live, train. But at home, there's like always something going on. A few weeks ago, we did a new air conditioning unit. There's like always random little odds and ends when you're at home you feel like you have to do. Whereas if you're just staying at like an Airbnb and you have like nothing else to do, you just train, eat, sleep, hang out with the dog, and that was pretty much all we did. I did that, for like 2.5, 3 weeks. So
this is something that I think that a lot of us listening to this, we think that like pros have like very like simple distilled lives. And don't get me wrong, somebody listening to this that's a mom with 3 kids that's training for a triathlon and she works full time.
Not the same.
Her life's really complex.
Very complex.
Okay, yeah. So don't want that to be misunderstood. But all of that said, with you, Keegan, like it's also knowing you, knowing your schedule, knowing the demands on you, and being like familiar with that. Like you have a lot of people asking for your time and attention. I mean, you're doing this podcast right now, and there's a whole lot of requests to do a bunch of that stuff. So like when you're coming into a block like this, are you also like intentionally trying to calm that noise and cut that out as well?
Yeah, that was definitely kind of the intent. And just, obviously there's still stuff that has to happen. You have to send emails and have occasional phone calls or whatever, but I try and keep everything to a minimum.
Yeah.
And just really kind of focus on the work, which is nice to get back to it sometimes, because that's kind of my favorite part about racing and this whole, lifestyle is like just the going into monk mode, as I like to call it, and just like knocking out the training and doing the work. And it feels good. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do. So
what's motivating you this year? I mean, you've set the course record. You darn near set it last year after a flat, like at Leadville. You've won Unbound. You've won the Lifetime Grand Prix multiple times. What's motivating you now?
I mean, I want to win Unbound again. That's the big motivator right now. I mean, that race gets harder and harder every year to win, and I want to win it again. And it's on the North Course, so it's a new course, different race than it has racing on the South Course. Competition's bigger, race is just harder. So, I mean, that's the focus. And for me, as a season as a whole, it's just like getting better, figuring out ways to improve.
Still getting better.
Yeah, always trying to.
It's a lot of
whether it's race tactics or fitness, it doesn't really matter as long as the end goal is you're going faster.
It's a good example for the athlete. We just answered a question a few weeks ago, and an athlete was writing in saying, like, have I reached my genetic potential, sort of a thing. And a lot of the time I think that we meet, like, whatever our lives allow, we meet that potential before we actually, hit that genetic potential for a lot of us. But it's easy to question that. Can we talk about equipment stuff here? We've talked about this before, and I want to have this conversation on the podcast here for people. I think that the big tire thing, the mountain bike tire thing, may have been like a bit of a red herring for gravel. Recently, Maxxis released 45s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've done some testing. You don't have to reveal any numbers on here. You've done testing, but they are actually an alarming amount faster.
Yeah, they are.
And they're 45s. They aren't mountain bike tires. What are your thoughts on this whole thing of just keep going bigger and that's getting faster?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a big can of worms, I feel like, because it's not one size fits all. I had tested Maxxis tires before, the mountain bike tires, gravel tires, and the mountain bike tires were faster.
Yep.
But these new tires with the HyperX compound are just that much faster. And in the end, the volume isn't necessarily what makes a tire fast. It's like the casing and the suppleness that makes a tire fast, and how it absorbs the impacts that it's taking from the ground, like rocks and cracks in the road or whatever, So I think it's really like course dependent and riding style as well. Like there's certain races where the mountain bike tire is still going to be faster. So I think you can't just say, oh, the 45 is faster. You have to, now we're back to racing 45s. I think you have to really like do your homework and figure out which race suits which tire best. And then there's also riding styles, how you plan to race the race. Like there's also that factor of like, do you want to set your tires up for a certain section? Do you want to have the fastest tires? Like, do you need like Alexi and I talked about it on our little like post-race show we have is like the cool down is that like he rides a mountain bike tire in the front because he feels like he needs that assistance in cornering to keep up with those of us who have a mountain bike background. So he feels like for him, even though it might roll slightly slower on the pavement, it's still a faster setup. Whereas like there's riders who maybe they need the help keeping up on the climbs or on the flats or whatever, so they can run a faster tire, and then you can kind of find that medium of what works best for you. So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario, and it's also not the same with every brand. Just because the new Maxxis HyperX 45s are faster than the Maxxis mountain bike tires doesn't mean that's going to be the same for every tire brand. Maybe their 45s are still slower. So I think it's like everyone has to kind of do their own homework and figure out what's best for them, and there's the certain situation.
Yeah, not an easy answer. I'm going to share a crackpot theory. Actual engineers in the chat, please jump in at me and let me know what I'm missing with this. But I feel like, because correct me if I'm wrong, that new HyperX casing, it's more similar to like a road tire, but it has like the EXO flat protection built into it.
Correct.
As a result, like I think a lot of gravel tires prior to this were kind of like a junior mountain bike tire. Like the same casing is what you would have in a mountain bike tire, just shrunk down. And those casings weren't necessarily designed to be efficient in that smaller size. And I think, it's my theory, this is where I want people to tell me I'm wrong. When you have that same casing, but in a smaller tire, the weight of you pushing down on that tire causes that tire to fold and kind of bend, and causes a sharper bend, possibly causing more loss to friction there in that sharper bend than what was originally intended for it to be a big tire, not have as sharp of a bend.
No, I agree. I think it's because it's how the tire deflects. So if it's like you said, the mountain bike tire, they're just shrinking it for gravel. The reason the mountain bike tire was faster when they were like, if they're the same casing, small and big, is that the bigger casing is deflecting relatively less than the smaller casing.
That's right.
So it's creating less friction. So that's why it's faster.
Yeah.
But the big tire still does roll over obstacles better. It's like the whole 26-inch versus 29-inch argument.
Yeah.
So I think there's a small portion of that still happens. That's why it's like, if the course is really rough and full of rocks and stuff, then like the big tire still might be faster, but it might not. Like I think that's like, it's just not it's not like I said, it's not one size fits all. So I think you're right. I think that's what happened initially is gravel tires were just mini mountain bike tires, and it just simply was slow.
Yeah.
And I think every brand almost did this. They just shrunk mountain bike tires, you know.
Yeah. A nuanced discussion on tire size instead of just saying go big. Imagine that. Yeah.
Right.
Nuanced discussion. Can we talk about suspension? Because this is another thing. With gravel bikes, and you have the Rudy fork on your bike that you run sometimes, depending on the course. Does that allow, like, that's the fork, then you can run a smaller tire that might roll faster? And thusly, maybe it makes you faster, but then there's aero gains. What are your thoughts on running the fork?
I like the fork. I think the fork is faster than I originally thought it was. Like it's like more comfortable, and it almost goes like, it's back to like the full suspension versus hardtail argument on the mountain bike. Just because a hardtail feels fast doesn't necessarily mean it is faster. Now, no one races hardtails. They're pretty much dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's like Leadville and a few races where like the hardtail still might be better. But in general, the full suspension's faster. So I think the same is kind of on gravel bikes. Like you have that suspension, and like, sure, there's a weight penalty, but I think like the speed, the fatigue, and like the rolling resistance, the same as the tire absorbing the bumps. The suspension is also absorbing the bumps. So it's letting you roll forward instead of over all these little bumps, you know?
Yeah. Do you think we'll see rear suspension?
We might. I'm sure there's brands working on it. Like it seems like it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Seems like a bike.
some have already kind of done it. Like Specialized had the STR, which is
Yeah.
like not really a full suspension, but it's like headed that direction.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's more bikes out there like that are like being worked on that might be more of a proper full suspension.
Because it feels like, you guys are going over washboards so often, and that's like such a momentum sapping thing.
Oh yeah, they suck. And even the fork, you can feel a huge difference on those. Like you ride washboards on, with the Rudy on there, and if you have like a 50 mil Rambler, or if right now I have a 2.1 shoved in there, like the washboards just get eaten. Whereas you ride washboards on a rigid with 45s, and no matter how supple the tire is, you just get rocked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think suspensions definitely has a place in gravel, but it definitely, you don't need a lot, You're just like taking that edge off. There's no big hits. It doesn't need to be really complex. You don't need fancy linkage. Like I think it needs to be very small, like svelte and refined.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Well, it's time for you guys to do your stretching routine and get your bedtime routine, so we're not going to interrupt that. We're going to respect the athletes. If you're listening to this, jump into the comments on Spotify or on YouTube. And we aren't going to talk race tactics for Unbound.
Not yet.
Nope, not yet. Doesn't need to be leaked. Doesn't need to be discussed. But all of you listening to this, needs to tell us. You need to tell us what Keegan needs to do and what Sofía needs to do from a tactical perspective to win Unbound.
Yeah, let's hear it.
We'll see if there's some good ones there. Maybe you can take some tips.
Yeah,
Yeah.
into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Keegan.
Thank you.